Hello, this is Johnny Pancho. Welcome to the pond, and we're coming at you again with another tabletop role-playing game design video. Today we will be talking about narrative, a subject that is favorite to many and the bane of others' existence. What is narrative? We posed this question to the search bar of Encyclopedia Britannica, and the answer we got back for that word, one definition, defined a narrative as a story told or written. Another definition said that it is the process of relating or telling a story. Now, from this, we can really, for our discussion today, surmise two approaches with the word narrative in an RPG. At the table, when the game is actually being played, you have the story unfolding, like what's actually going to be told and retold by those players when they go to their family gatherings, and unassuming relatives are bombarded with a story they may or may not have wanted to hear. But on the other side, you have the narrative that arises from the book. This may also be referred to as the setting or the set dressing of the world that the game takes place in. Now, you could compare this, for illustrative purpose, to a movie production. Now, I am by no means a movie production expert and do not claim to be one, but I'm pretty sure in movies they have a system something like this. They have a pre-production phase where all the actors learn their lines and the director writes and rewrites the script as it's to take place. And they have when they actually do the recording, and then they have post-production where they clean things up and do some editing. Now, as far as tabletop role-playing game design goes, you can think of that time when that pre-production is occurring, similar to us designing the book. The narrative as it happens, as it's laid out, up to the point of handing that book over to the players and the GM at each individual table. But what about once they get that? Once they get it, it's in their hands. It's kind of like the recording process. An actor may say what's written on the lines, or they may say their own adjusted version of what's written in their lines. And what's recorded is what's recorded, and that's that. But then afterward, the GM kind of adjudicates what can and cannot happen with that, and you get the finalized story. After the game is over, the TPK has taken place. No, we're joking. We don't do TPKs here, right, guys? But the story takes place, and then the players go on to live their life and tell stories to unassuming relatives about how they slayed the level 18 dragon with nothing but a short sword and a dream in their hand. So, our advice to anyone who is writing a tabletop role-playing game is to keep your focus on the narrative as it occurs in the past. Let the part of the story that is from the book, the narrative in the book, be what happens up to the point that the game master and the players get their hands on it. This way, they don't feel limited by the content of the book. And you could even explicitly say in the book, hey, we will not make anything past this point in the timeline. Or this is the point in the timeline where we hand it off to you as the ones playing the game to determine what goes forward. In that way, you set a good precedent for them, but then also give them a lot of room to destroy the beautiful world that you've created, as is right in the world. The narrative process is how we get those stories that we had discussed. If there's no narration to begin with, it makes it a lot harder once that game gets to the table for the GM to forge. It puts a lot more work on them that they have to do. Now, some of that is work that game masters actually enjoy. A lot of game masters, such as myself, quite like to make their own stories and forge their own tales. And there comes their own risk with that of railroading, but that's a subject for another day. The point being that we can help out this process by putting something before, by setting a precedent of what can and can't happen in the setting we give with the game mechanics. And this it facilitates the memories that players will come back for more and more as they play your game, players and GMs. And now there is a major section of tabletop role-playing games. No harping against them, no ill will or anything, but they tend to put this as something secondary to the game mechanics. They will forego the narrative and the setup, the storytelling that sets up where the game is to start off. This really, in a lot of cases, can be like foregoing half of the game. Many will write this off as just being flavor, and that is such a painful term in my head, to say that it is just flavor. Do you know how the Encyclopedia Britannica, our good old friend, defines the word flavor? It calls it a substance that is added to food or drink to give it a desired taste. If you have no desired taste that you're putting into something that you're making, why are you making it? You could compare it to cooking food. There's this wonderful, beautiful substance that is used in many, many cooking projects: mayo. Here's the thing about mayo. Mayo is the perfect substitute for a myriad of staples in the kitchen. Eggs, butter, oil, you name it, mayo can replace it. But mayo is just that, a replacement, a substitute. The reason that a substitute is because the original wasn't available. And maybe your grandma's homemade cake recipe calls for mayo to be in the ingredients list, and in that case, it's not a substitute. But if it's not, then you using it is using it as a substitute. Why would we default to the substitute? That's essentially what we're doing if we tell those who are playing our game, there is a potential narrative that I just kind of put in with that, but you can really use this system with any narrative. If they're not intertwined together, that can cause a lot of friction or difficulty. Intertwining mechanics and narrative makes the whole game feel more cohesive. It makes it a more impactful design. And it makes it to where they work together as if they were best for each other, like they were meant to be. As we mentioned earlier, for some, this is the most fun part of the process, but for a lot of others, this is a difficulty, a sticking point. So, how can you do it? Well, easiest way is to live life and to question possibilities, question what ifs that may not actually be things that could occur in reality. Some may say about this that they don't have the imaginative potential to do this, but you do. Just like how I have the muscle potential to dunk a basketball or to swing a home run, the potential's there. Yeah, I just haven't exercised that, and I probably won't. But you have the same potential for imagination. You just have to know how to exercise it. With that same illustration of athletes, different athletes train different muscles better. I actually have this workmate of mine who, in their part-time, they do gymnastics. But they had told me this story about when one of their friends invited them to go cycling, and it did not go well, because the muscles that are trained for different activities, even if it's the same type of activity, it gives a different angle for the specific activity that's being done. So, what should you do? Find your angle. Now, this is different from a genre, because a genre is something that is predetermined, malleable, outside, but the angle is specifically your perspective, what you bring to the design space. This may be completely unique, and it may not, but your perspective on a genre will make a big difference in how it's portrayed. A big way to help find your perspective is to play a little game I like to call What If. The best way to play this game is to find a willing volunteer and just start asking them, what if? And then let them respond with what they say. And then once they give a response beyond, you should not be asking things like that, what is wrong with you? And then ask them another what if question and just see where it leads you. The questions can help you to spark your imagination and to think about what could be possible in your tabletop world and role-playing game story and narrative. Some think that either it's develop the mechanics first or develop the narrative first. But wouldn't it be so much better if we plan to develop them in tandem? That is with one another, because you see, creativity is not always straightforward. It's a messy process, and sometimes inspiration just does not allow for a consistent development cycle. Think about when you play tabletop role playing games. Isn't it often the best games where a GM prepares some degree of structure? It's not completely out in the wild, whatever happens, happens, but that the players still have their spontaneity. They're not railroaded to a specific path. When these two things collide with each other, it makes an explosion of some of the most amazing scenes, some of the best games that could take place. In a similar way, when developing an RPG, you can, when inspiration sparks for a specific mechanic, make a piece of narrative that goes along with that mechanic. And you have to resist the inclination to make all of the narrative at that point, but just make a part of the narrative, and then make a part of the mechanic. Let them leapfrog one another and see where it goes. In simple, everywhere, in varying amounts. You see, if the mechanics and the narrative are able to play with one another, bounce off one another within your role playing game book, players will better be able to grok. Is that how you say that word? What's a better word for that? Internalize. Players will better internalize the rules as you have them written. For example, public speakers are often encouraged to use illustrations to drive home the main point. So if you include a small hint of major mechanic explanations, if you include a small hint of world building, a small piece of lore, not your lore dump, save that for the back of the book or for another book, or there's a fire out back and we could save it for that. No, we love your lore. Just don't put it after every mechanic, but put a small piece of world building, small mechanic hint in each section where there's a major mechanic that's explained. This way, they can bounce off one another, and it'll show that your mechanics and your world building, your narrative, work together really well. So, who should you design the narrative for? Who should you present it facing? Well, there's actually three that you should be presenting your narrative for. You should present it for potential players, you should present it for current players, and of course, you should present it for game masters. And each one of these individuals actually need the narrative presented in a different way to engage with the game. For potential players, we would encourage targeting your imagery on the cover of your book and your advertisement. If you do advertisement, that's up to you. But we encourage you to use those as your ways of targeting potential players to engage with your narrative, because we want people to engage with the narrative. Use imagery that sets the feeling and the tone and matches what kind of past you've set for your narrative, your setting. With GMs, make the rule book aimed toward them. Let's face it, let's be real. The GM, the game master, dungeon master, whatever it's called in your game, is the most likely person to read the book. And they will probably orally retell to the players what was in that book. You have some tables where everyone will read, and those are the best tables. But usually, it's going to be the GM reading it. So how can you target the players to engage, get involved with the narrative? What do players look at more than any other piece, any other part of the role-playing game? Their character sheet. Can you, on the character sheet, include icons that relate to some deeper part of the lore, that if players draw that out, they actually gain more benefit on their playthrough? Another way you can is by your choice of words. The names of skills, the names of special abilities. Can these be named in a way that they draw out something about the lore in your world? In these ways, you'll be able to keep narrative's role prevalent in your game and make for a more fun tabletop role-playing experience. Well, thank you for listening. That concludes this narrative advice for the day, and so we'll move right on into our consideration of the next part of the KSR rulebook under Introduction. Chaos 7 Reclamation. An introduction to KSR. Chaos 7 KSR is a tabletop role playing game set in the solar system of Bera, a system full of adventure, wonder, and discovery. The people of Bera, collectively known as Barons, must learn to navigate a new age of rediscovery. The game takes place 200 Beras, their solar years, after the largest catastrophe in Baron history, the Chaos Wave. This unnatural disaster disrupted planetary travel and communication for 100 Beras. It also mutated the Baron genome, resulting in unusual abilities. Each planet learned to cope under these new realities with unique government and social structures. Following the year 200K, 200 years after the Chaos Wave, Baron society has risen through a new era of reemergence and must reclaim their identity as a people. But with so much lost to time and change, can the past embers still light the future's way? This is the life of the characters existing in KSR. This is the Baron story. Welcome to the Reclamation. Thank you very much for joining us here on Johnny Pancho. Stay in the pond if you'd like. Feel free to leave a comment down below. And please be kind to others, as this is a new space. We want to encourage as many designers as possible to share their thoughts and their insights as well. And if you would like and subscribe, and we will see you next time here in the pond. This is Johnny Pancho signing out.